I'm Olaiya Borisade. It is a privilege to be part of this project. I have passion for African history and culture. I study history and international studies, and I also teach it as well. So the history of African people and their cultures the beauties that make Africans to be unique, to what it takes to exhibit what is peculiar to them and what is sellable about them. And if the beauty is harnessed, it has a long way to tell the story of Africa to those in the diaspora and even beyond. So the history of Nigeria before that period actually was the history of indigenous people. Because long before then, there was nothing like Nigeria as an identity and as an entity. There was no entity called Nigeria, and there was no single identity that one could ascribe as belonging to the people we now refer to as Nigerians. So what I obtained then was a continuum of landmass with different people, different cultures, and different systems of government. Some were centralized, some were stateless, and depending on the geographical location, each society then that eventually gravitated towards evolving what is now known as Nigeria practiced separate and distinct social, economic, and political problems. So the history of Nigeria before then was the history of individuating societies. And if one speak about the number of ethnic groups that make up Nigeria, and if that should lead to the tracing of that history, that would take probably a very long time to. But what is important is that there are major groups such as the Hausa in the northern part of Nigeria that we know today, then the Kanuri that formed the then Bono Empire, those in the south, in the western states of Nigeria today that we call the Yoruba group, then the Eyraud group, almost similar and with close affinity, Yoruba group, then those, some of them stateless societies in the eastern part of the lower Niger, the Igbos, the Biobios, the Hefiks. Then in that part of Nigeria that we call the Middle Belt today, perhaps one could identify over 200 different ethnic groups with distinct processes of evolution. So what one can say about the history of Nigeria from this perspective is to actually generalize and trace the history of some of these major groups, and with the hope that they represent the history of the various groups that make up Nigeria. Then we can start from the Hausa states, where you have the northern Nigeria today, because Hausa was the dominant ethnic and linguistic group in that part of the country and very close to the savannah. Then there is from a collection of oral traditions, one could trace the origin of the Hausas to a certain Bagudo in the year 999 AD. But what really happened was that there were pockets of settlements on that part of the world until there was a gradual evolution of city-states from about 14th century AD, thereabouts. These city-states were the major centers of commerce. Then they were major political headquarters of vast areas. And the major cities then, like the Gobri, Zaria, Kano, Katsina, the major Hausa city-states were kind of metropolis. And the adjoining settlements, or those smaller principalities and princely societies that depended on them, sought most often protection and the opportunity to transact some commercial deals through the channels they offered. Because of that strategic location, close to in the savannah, close to the Sahara, and from the Sahara it was very easy then for one to interact and transact with those in the Middle East, principally Egypt and across the Mediterranean. So because of that, there was a flow of commercial activities, and that in itself helped the growth of some of those Hausa city-states. Then from about 15th century onward, some of them became influenced by the mode of political and administrative systems obtained in neighboring Ekane Bonu, which model was built on Islamic centralized system. So they imbibed some of those cultures, and the Hausa city-states began to have some formalized military structures unlike what existed before them. But one important thing that also led to that decline, probably by the 19th century, when the Fulani invasion, the Fulani intrusion ended the development, the trajectory that would have led to a development towards organic formation of a centralized Hausa state. Was this stateless and lack of centralized system, because it was very difficult for them to galvanize themselves or to have a central unit that could coordinate them against external aggressors. So, but principally, they started imbibing those and one important thing one could learn about the Hausas then was that they were more friendly to themselves than to outsiders, in spite of the fact that there was no lack of central coordinating unit that could galvanize them into a single system. So that's the Hausa. But one important thing is that they were not for crafts, they were not for trans-Saharan trade. They were able to achieve so much from that. Then close to the Hausa city-states, then was the Kanem Borno Empire. the Kanem-Borno Empire. The empire came about in the 9th century AD and built on a very strong Islamic foundation. Right from the beginning, it was a major center of learning and commerce. And the rulers were from the Safawa dynasty. The Safawa dynasty started as an hereditary class because obtaining or ascending to rulership was based on hereditary factor. So they were able to build a formidable empire. It was actually an empire. At some point, it became the major crossroad between those in the savannah and the Middle East across the Sahara. Talking about the Kanem-Borno Empire, at various stages of their development, depending on the socio-political climate and the kind of leadership that was coordinating the affairs. Sometimes they were very weak, sometimes they were very strong, sometimes they were altogether indifferent to what. But what is necessary is that there was a very remarkable empire of Kanem-Borno dominated by the Kanuri people. Up till the 16th century, the Kanem-Borno was a great center of, like I told you, center of Islamic learning, built on a very formidable Islamic tradition, having one of the most sustainable and enduring political heritage in the Western Sudan. Then, if you move a bit downward in the area of in the area that is known as the Middle Belt today, because there are so many of them, so it is wise to pick two of the most renowned of such groups, the Nupes and the Thieves. The Thieves, because of what obtained then, were more or less stateless. It was difficult to find a strong, centralized thief settlement. And because of that, there was always a problem, especially incursions from the Jokun's neighbors southward. That did not really give the thieves all the necessary strength to forge a united front, to form an empire, a kingdom that will be renowned. Then the Nupes were a bit different. They had a monarchical system, and they also had a centralized form of political administration. With that, they were able to evolve a model that was obtainable any strong and developed political system in any part of Nigeria at that time. Then close to the Nupes, then now come down south. Down south, that is the lower Niger, what I've been discussing about before now. Has been allusion to areas up the Niger, because even the Nigeria itself earned the name as a result of the preponderance of River Niger lying across the geopolitical divisions. So River Niger is a very good factor in determining the identity of Nigeria and what eventually earned it started as an appellation, Niger area, before it became Nigeria by name and even by recognition. So down the south, the Yoruba city-states. The Yoruba city-states are the Yorubas actually comprised of many kingdoms. One of the most urbanized societies in Africa before then, highly urbanized. And most Yoruba settlements were kingdoms in which political units were headed by traditional rulers known as the Obas. Then the major political units were called Ilu, town. So if you have an Ilu, you have an Oba at the apex. The Obas then were seen as sacred and divine rulers. They were held in awe. They were perceived to be mystical and divine rulers. The process of their emergence has to do with the selection and installation before they are eventually coronated fully. The process is so elaborate, so rigorous, and so ritualistic. The essence is that at the end of the entire process, a Yoruba Oba is separated from the ordinary people, from the mortals, because it was the belief of the people that they were immortals. They don't die. After their entire sojourn on earth, they will retreat to the inner room. Like I said earlier, the main political units were the towns, the kingdoms, and each kingdom was headed by an Oba. And one common practice was that an Oba must have a totem that symbolized its authority and the essence of his rulership. The totem is a possession or beaded crown known as Adeleke. And there is a story behind that. The story is that major kingdoms in Yoruba land emanated from the progenitor of the race, known by the name of Oduduwa. He was said to be the originator of the Yoruba race. But historical evidence has made us to realize that what he actually did was that he brought about a revolution, and which led to monastic system and a centralized system of government in Ife. Ife is considered to be the cradle of the Yoruba race. So with that, he was able to establish his sovereignty and also to sustain his dynastic influence over the race and even centuries after his death. So what his offspring did was that since Ife, where Oduduwa was, would not really contain them, they decided to move to other parts of the area known as Yoruba land today. And wherever they went, as a symbol of authority after conquering the people, they will request from Ife that a beaded crown be sent to them. There was actually, at some point, after the dynasty of Oduduwa was established in Ife, the people gathered, they had an arrangement and planned a dispersal. So, after which they were able to disperse to various parts of Yoruba land. So wherever they went, and if there was any indigenous or autochthonous group that they met on ground, after conquering them, they will bring the beaded crown as a symbol of authority over them. And that will be the beginning, the foundation of a kingdom. So, in various parts of Yoruba land, there were many kingdoms. And as time went on, one of the kingdoms eventually became a bigger empire, and known as Oyo Empire. And it was an empire that had some distinct attributes because of its location in the savannah. Because then, the story of Nigeria or the story of Western Sudan before the 19th century had much to do with empire building, and empire building was predicated on geographical factor, particularly those in the savannah. So Oyo had that privilege. They were able to engage in trans-Sahara trade. They were able to build a formidable military formation based on cavalry. Cavalry is military formation that is built around horses. The other part of Yoruba land was a forested zone. So it was not too possible for Yoruba built its army on cavalry to move into the forested zone because of the problem of Zeze fly. Zeze fly was a common enemy of horses. So horses will prefer to be in the savannah. So, but beneath Oyo, there were several other kingdoms. Ondo, Owo, Ijebu, Ijesha, and so many of them. Some of them maintained distinct identities, but they had a system built on a common perception of common origin, common culture, and what a scholar, Akinjogbe, will refer as the Ebi Commonwealths. Because they realized that, with different dialects or languages, then those languages were intelligible enough to all of them. And there was also certain attributes. They realized that the founders of the kingdoms all traced their roots to Ife, to Oduduwa, all built their authority on possession of Adeleke, which they brought from Ife. So because of that, they could agree on certain conditions, and they could impose common taboos on themselves. And one of the taboos then was that the origin, the source of the race, Ife. Ife was immune from attack by any Yoruba kingdom, however powerful. Ife was to be protected because Ife was regarded as a source where the founders, where the progenitors of each kingdom came from. And in order to give them the much needed respect that they deserved, Ife was given all the necessary cultural immunity. Now, like I said, Oyo was the principal kingdom, very big militarily, very big, and was able to extend its influence even beyond Yoruba land into some parts of what is now known as Benin Republic, then known as Dahomey, and various parts of until the 19th century when it crumbled. The crumbling of the empire led to another story entirely, and that story was the destruction of the general Yoruba political system in the 19th century, and that was also applicable to virtually every part of Africa in the 19th century. Then, apart from the Yoruba society, there were the Ibiobios, the Efiks, the Eastern Niger Delta people, principally the Jaw people, and some of them, because of the peculiarities of their geographical location, they were not able to build centralized and recognizable entities. Some of them were chiefly societies. Some were based on eldership. The elders automatically take control, or the family of the founder of such. The Jaws particularly, they are affiliated groups such as Kalabari, Nimbis, and they became unknown to outsiders and to most historians, particularly with transatlantic slave trade, because of their location to the coast and because most of the societies lay around the Niger tributaries. So that gave them the strategic and privileged position to trade with those in the Insala, to serve as middlemen. But traditionally, their main occupation, the Jaws, their main occupation was fishing, because they were in the riverine area. Fishing and fuel, salt making, farming that was not really large scale, because it was difficult to acquire a huge land mass because of interruption of waters. So, like I said, what applied to them also was obtainable in most parts of Efik, the Igbos, and as a result of which some of them only evolved their republican systems, not highly urbanized as at that time, not highly centralized and non-monastic. Then another important kingdom that shared attributes with the Yorubas, and also by the virtue of common ancestry, of the common dynastic ancestry between them and the Ife people, the Edo or Benin people. They are the immediate neighbors of the Yoruba in the east. Those had the rulers before the 15th century. They had a ruler and they were able to have a systematic process of succession. They had what was known then as the Ogizo's dynasty. But it was difficult to put the people together. It was difficult to coordinate their affairs. And until the 14th century, when they had some understanding with his prince from Ife, who eventually established the dynasty that is still administering the traditional affairs of the Edo people till today. From that period, the Beninese were able to conquer adjoining lands, and from there they were able to expand their kingdom. The kingdom became expanded into an empire form, to the extent that the sovereignty covered almost every part of Lagos, some parts of eastern Yoruba land, and they, at some point, probably in the 16th century, perhaps had the largest empire in the whole of Western Africa. And the empire was coordinated, as I told you earlier, by the dynasty, which also originated from Ife. The dynasty was a very strong, had a very strong traditional influence with the people, and they were able to build stronger military. When Benin was first visited, of all the societies, pre-19th century societies and states in Nigeria, Benin was the first to be visited by the Europeans. And as a matter of fact, some of the Portuguese that visited some streets of Benin then realized that the roads in Benin were about 6 times larger than the biggest roads in Portugal. That was the era of Portuguese ascendancy in Europe. You know, the ascendancy of Portugal was led to the exploration of the world. The exploration of particularly the Atlantic. They were able to, birth out West Africa. They moved toward the southern tip before they were able to find their way to through Indian Ocean to India, before Spain also took a cue when Christopher Columbus led the initiative in an attempt to establish a westward alternative to India. But in the bid for the Portuguese to navigate the coastline of Africa, through West Africa to the south, and the Beninese were the first Nigerians they met, and what they met there in the then Benin Empire was awesome. Meaning that the Benin was able to build a virile civilization. A virile civilization that was built around a very strong monastic tradition, who was also borrowed from Ife. So, in the diaspora, before that period, even during the period, I just told you about how some of the kingdoms individually manage their affairs, and how some kingdoms also that shared common attributes with others were able to coordinate their affairs in forging a common front to sustain their culture and maintain their political heritage. But before the 19th century, One other important epoch, I was talking about the discovery of America. I made a very slight reference to it after telling you about the Portuguese experience. And the Portuguese experience often discovered Africa, but they didn't go into the interior. Then the Spanish, Columbus led the initiative to discover the Americas. And with the attraction of the American continent to the Europeans, then the need to establish a plantation system as the mainstay of European mercantilist economy became imperative. And what really actually sustained that was slave labor. The major source of labor was slave. And it is a very sad aspect of the history of various Nigerian societies, mainly those in western and those in southern Niger, or that it became the major source of slave labor. So talking about cultural, I told you earlier that the culture, the tradition or whatever, very, very strong enough. You know, and about for over 300, 400 years, people were shipped from Africa, from this part of Africa, to the Americas as slaves. And some of the slaves were able to retain their linguistic affinity with the source. They were able to sustain their cultural attributes. And a very important evidence today is the ever-expanding religion that is known as Santeria. That it is practiced in most Caribbean, West Indies today. It's a secret religion, taking some aspects of particularly Yoruba traditional religion and the religions that they were exposed to, particularly Catholicism. But they were able to manage. They were able to, and if you go to most parts, some of those things are even declining. But if you go to those places, some parts of Brazil where you have dominant black populations, Cuba, Trinidad and Tobago, Dominican Republic, you will discover that the religion is popular among the people. So if slavery lasts for 300 to 400 years, and with the people not allowed to practice their religion, to exhibit any of their cultural traits, for the same people after centuries also to be able to reinvent the very, very core aspect of their culture, that which is religion, and to superimpose such on the religion they were exposed to, is an indication that the culture, the tradition of Africa, or particular people from this part of Nigeria, the tradition is very, very strong enough. So the tradition has been able to withstand all forms of intrusions, all forms of assaults, to manage to retain its original identity. So it is a very, very good thing. By the time you, with a little, you get to know about the histories of various communities, various kingdoms, and their cultural practices, because the cultures are not similar in most cases. The cultures, but we can find common trends in them. And by the time you go it to see, you will see the beauty, you will see those things that make them to be very, very enduring. Peace, peace has never been automatic in any human society. Right from the beginning, peace has always come as an outcome of conscious efforts. By nature, human beings are bellicose. Human beings are bellicose. So peace is usually the outcome of an agreement to suspend certain militaristic or bellicosity of our nation. I told you about the evolution of kingdoms and empires. Kingdoms, empires were not built through peaceful processes. They came through conquests, through subjugations, and through forceful domination by superior groups. So, but if you like you said, between kingdoms, there were various modes of maintaining diplomatic relations between various kingdoms, because after war, diplomacy is usually the next line of action. And it is when diplomacy breaks down that war takes over. But usually between two peaceful kingdoms, I just told you about the Yoruba experience earlier. There were many powerful kingdoms, but in order to maintain peace between the kingdoms, they evolved what I referred to earlier as the Ebi Commonwealth concepts. The concept is that, we are family. And if we are family, if two kingdoms are at loggerheads, then probably whoever that was holding forth at the source of the race should intervene. An intervention was done through emissaries. It wasn't until we started having Western type of diplomatic processes, emissaries, and whatever. But before we had an organic way of engaging in diplomatic relations. In Yoruba, for instance, there were some totems that represented messages of peace. Between some kingdoms, if you want to maintain peace with another kingdom, you could send a totem. It could be a dove, it could be a white cloth, it could be a leaf. And there are some too that be interpreted otherwise. If you want war, there are some totems that will be sent. There are some emissaries, envoys, that represented different interpretations of relationship between two kingdoms. Some, by their appearance, they indicated that the other party was prepared for war. Some, by their appearance, they symbolized peace. We don't want peace. Why not settle this amicably? So, you can also translate this Yoruba experience. I told you about the Hausa city-states. Though they did not have a centralized political system, but they were able to maintain cordial relationship among themselves, and that was owed largely to the diplomatic tradition that they evolved over time. And in the eastern Niger Delta, the various groups also had, and that has led to the interrogation of the concept of international relations itself. That even beyond the Eurocentric conceptualization of international relations, various kingdoms then, what actually existed between them was the traditional form of international relation that was limited to the kind of system they practice and to the cultural peculiarities. And some will tell you that, well, there was international relations not until the Eurocentric Westphalian tradition of statehood became imposed on the people, that they began to fashion their own form of diplomatic or interstate relations. They were actually states, and the states in most cases cooperated. They cooperated through the modicum of diplomatic traditions that they established among themselves.